Hi, it's Keith McGowan, the Outboard Dad. Continuing on with Jake's 9.9. We're going to go ahead and put a couple bolts in this. You see I already have some. There's one on the back side here. I just want to make sure this is down and even and flat. Let the sealer set up a little bit while I'm just making sure I have all my water pump stuff set up the right way. Make sure my shift shaft works. Just let it seal up and set up pretty good. Then I can take those bolts out and put that water pump on. Remember, most times it's just the top cover coming off, so you lose the tightness on this bottom gasket anyway, assuming that it reseals each time you change the water pump. So it shouldn't have a problem with that, but just want to take a chance, or not take a chance, and be as sure as I can. So I'm just snugging them up, just so it all meets and hits that gasket. I don't want to smush the gasket down yet. I'm going to do that last when we put our water pump on. So now we're going to look at that drawing again. Put our washers on, get our water pump in. Going to review the drawing, make sure I didn't miss anything. We're going to make sure our shift works. We can do that now, right, because we have our clip in there. So it looks like we're in forward now, neutral, and reverse. So it looks like we're shifting properly. So that looks good. It'll be lined up again when we put it back up. We're going to put our outboard back on here when we put it back up inside there. Looks like we're ready for our water pump impeller and put the top on. Then there's a pickup tube that comes off of it that I saw in the drawing, right off the top of this. Shows this pickup, I'm sorry, it's not a pickup tube. This is where the water goes up, pumps out to the motor. I'm assuming this piece is still on the motor. We're going to have to check it out because I don't see it on here when we took it apart. I can also check my old video, but a little curious as to maybe that's why, maybe it deteriorated, because this is an all rubber piece. If you see this, it's all rubber. It's not plastic. The whole thing is flexible. So in our drawing, we show that going on top there, and then it looks like there's a short tube, or maybe that tube goes all the way up to the motor. I'm also going to force air, compressed air, not a lot, up that to make sure it comes out the engine as well. So let's do that next before we go crazy. Don't see anything else missing, so I think we're ready for our water pump. So these are the small washers that showed in the drawing that were needed. I can go ahead and take my tape off that I put on my shaft to protect it, or I could leave it on for now, doesn't matter. Now I'm going to take my impeller. What I'm going to do is my keyway, if you notice my keyway has a flat side here, and then it has the rounded side. The rounded side is what goes along the impeller, and the flat side goes along the shaft. So I'm going to take a little dab of grease. You notice there's a flat spot on this shaft here, and I'm going to put it right on that flat spot to hold it in place while we slide the impeller down. Now it can be tricky sometimes to get this lined up. So I'm not a fan of getting grease on the impeller. Sometimes certain petroleum products can eat away at rubber, so I make sure my hands are clean when I do this. A little WD-40 would be okay because that's not going to eat away at the rubber. This impeller looks to be the same on both sides. Sometimes it'll be sealed off and the keyway only goes on one way, but this looks to be the same on both sides. And when I check my old impeller, it's the same way, covered in oil. So we should be able to slide this on. Want to check something first. That keyway is on this, so I'm going to hold it here so I know my keyway lines up with this point. When I slide it over and line that up with that keyway. And there we go. Now we've got another washer. We're going to go on top. Now we can take our bolts out. We'll put our top cover on. So I do like to take a little bit of, well, this one's been around for a while. Here's a better advertisement. Jack of all sprays. It's a very good penetrating oil, cutting oil. It stays there for a long time, kind of thickens a little bit, almost like a grease would. And I like to do that on the threads of these bolts so that in 5 years, when it's time to change this water pump again, some guys say 2 years, This one's probably been a whole lot, well, it's been in the shed for 8 years, so this way when it sits there for that period of time, we don't get as much corrosion. So just a little bit. So as some of you have seen before, I like to take a little bit of WD-40, put it on the points here because we're going to rotate this shaft. I'm going to clean the shaft off so I can get a good grip on it with my rubber glove. Now this metal on metal part didn't have any sealer on it. Does not show a gasket between the two, so it shouldn't need anything from the factory. Nothing was there when it came apart, so it must be figured in. So we also have, if you remember those 2 pins, there's one right here, there's one on the other side. It comes through also on this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to slide this over. I have the other washer on the top. Make sure that we're lined up properly. Did it backwards the first time. Now we're going to grab our shaft and rotate it clockwise to get those impeller ears, for a better word, fins, whatever you want to call them, rotating in the right direction. And then it should push right down. I cleaned up the threads with a nice little rag, wire brush if you need to. Clean them up when you drop them. And then we'll just tighten up all these bolts. All right, now that we got this all tightened up, everything is sealed. I'm going to go ahead and hook up our gauge to it. We're going to drain the oil out again, because I already changed the oil once, thinking the seals were good. We did pressure test it, it held, but once we pulled it apart, we realized it had to be done. So we're going to go ahead and pressure test this again. So I'm going to go ahead and get pressure on this, set it aside, and let it sit. Should be 10 pounds for 10 minutes. And we're going to make sure, if it's dropping, we're going to start spraying bubbles around, make sure our prop shaft seals are okay, and then we'll take it from there. So what we're going to do while we put this aside is I'll put my motor back up here. We're going to look underneath. We're going to make sure that that little pickup tube, or that, I keep calling it a pickup tube, that rubber piece that sends the water up, I'm sure there's a name for it. I'll have to look it up. But make sure that that's there, or something is there to make sure we're forcing the water up to the engine. So that's what we'll do next. So the other thing we're going to do here that I forgot to mention is these holes have corrosion in them, right? I don't know if you can see, if I take my screwdriver and do that, you can see the white powder coming out of it. So we're going to clean off all this corrosion. We're not going to scrape the paint off. We're just going to get the corrosion out of the way so the bolts go up there freely. And then we're going to make sure we lube those areas up really good with a nice heavy grease. This way, next time it comes apart, whoever does it, it comes apart easier. They can do the water pump, put it back together, and it's not as much of a process as we do today. So that's what we look for here at the Outboard Dad channel. We look to make things easier for the next person and have longevity. I am the Outboard Dad. Please like, subscribe, and send me any comments you have about mistakes I made or things I could have done better, or anything you're working on that I can help you with. Have a great day.